200 years from now, each of us will not only be dead, but it's quite likely that no one will even remember your name. And for those very few of us whose names are remembered, little else will remain, apart from the building we've lent our name to, or perhaps the disease we've christened. I suspect that history is also slightly startled to find someone who is remembered at all. And yet there are a few people through history who have been remembered as a little bit more than just the name. For example, in first century Judea, there arose a man who some thought was the Messiah, although he doesn't seem to have trumpeted this about himself. He taught persuasively, he gathered followers, he preached about freedom, foreshadowing a decisive miracle that would provide deliverance to his disciples. Historical evidence shows that he and his followers were most likely nonviolent pacifists. And at the decisive moment, the Romans executed him by cutting off his head. I'm referring, of course, to Theudas, the first century Judean Messiah figure, who claimed that he could part the waters of the Jordan, and his followers could pass over on dry land. In the event, the Romans killed Theudas, and many of his several hundred followers he brought with him. The rest of them scattered, never to be heard from again. My point is this. It's virtually a miracle that we know of Theudas at all. We know of him only from a couple of first-century documents. But there's no one today who is a follower of Theudas, even though he was thought to have been the Messiah. His bones lie in the grave, and to all but the historical specialist, he is forgotten. All of which brings us then to Jesus. We not only remember Jesus, but around 2 billion people worldwide claim to worship him, follow him, to be in his spirit. Like Theudas, he died, and his followers were scattered. But somehow, that wasn't the end of the story. It might seem odd to begin talking about who Jesus is with the resurrection. There are any number of other places we might start. But the fact is, if it weren't for the resurrection, we would know nothing of Jesus. If it weren't for the resurrection, there would be no particular sense of this fellow dying on a cross being significant. After all, the Romans crucified people all the time. And his teaching, well, it's good stuff, but there's no reason to think that it would be of more than antiquarian interest if it weren't for the odd reports about his story not ending with his death. It's because of the resurrection and all that might be possible because of that we might think his teaching would be more than the ramblings of an obscure peasant rabbi. No, all of this takes on significance only in light of the resurrection. It's because of this, because of the empty tomb, because of the appearances, and even the ending of the appearances and the giving of his Spirit, it's in light of all this that we think any of this might be of any kind of existential, social, political, or philosophical import. So in resurrection, Jesus wasn't resuscitated or revived. He really died and was raised from death. He wasn't a spirit, a ghost, or a vivid apparition or dream. He was really present as a person with a body. This is the surprise, and we might even say the scandal of the resurrection. We aren't left with pious platitudes about Jesus going to heaven or the disciples seeing his ghost. We're left with the unsettling truth that this is God's decisive work to set things to rights. And this is unsettling in part because this is not just the truth of Jesus. His resurrection is not just about him being okay. Former Archbishop Rowan Williams points out that in the resurrection, what Jesus does is come to those who have abandoned him, his disciples. And when he comes to them, he forgives them. But he also commissions them to go out to those who have killed him and now communicate this same forgiveness that they have received, communicate that forgiveness to them. In his resurrection, Jesus forgives us, but we're also commissioned to share this good news to the rest of the world. This means that being a disciple of Christ isn't just a matter of being comforted by his forgiveness, but of being given a mission to go out and to tell others about it too.